Instead of just, talking about it, the Congress has the power to compel testimony. Get Alex Acosta in there. He'll tell you that Trump kicked him out of Mar-a-Lago. That's all been litigated. Let's just stipulate the birthday card is real. That is stupid, man. It's stupid. That's the worst you got. The island, as we know, was a complete cesspool. He invokes the Duke of York, who has been stripped of his titles. And I'll say this, the worst televised interview in the history of that medium. One question is, this is the press release. It said that teams of civil liberties experts comb through the digital and documentary evidence with the, and so there's a couple of scenarios here. Number one, they're lying. There was no civil liberties experts, and I would actually prefer that. Or it's the truth, which is even worse because it doesn't answer, number one, how did the DOJ decide which civil liberties experts got to go through the material? How did that happen? Where's the public contract if they did?
Yeah, and I don't really even know what that means. Like, are those lawyers? Like, what's an expert? Because experts
are they
can
saying
be
that those are
non-lawyers.
experts within the department? And what qualifies a department official to be a civil liberties expert? You could argue that you and I are civil liberties experts. You more than me.
Right.
You've
Well, and I was going to
stood on
say
the stand and
defense
argued.
attorneys. Like, is that
course.
what they're saying? That they talked to a bunch of defense attorneys and got their take on it before they decided to make a prosecutional decision on the Epstein files? That sounds kind of insane.
Yes, and this is the type of analysis that is very rarely done. Me and you are the nerds. I read every single line, right, of this press release. We're the only group in the country to ask about this. Why was this phrase included? And the import of that, why is that important? Number one, if you have civil liberties experts going over this and they don't think that there are uncharged third parties within the statute of limitations, I can sell you the Brooklyn Bridge. The idea, Robert, that these uncharged third parties are in the clear is preposterous.
I agree. Well, we pulled up Epstein 2019 indictment alone and went through that again for the second time and saw a conspiracy, a bunch of other, named people in there. And that's not like ancient history. That was the 2019 new indictment that is just several years old, right? And so where did all of that go if Pam Bondi comes in and suddenly comes to the opposite conclusion of the sitting U.S. attorney at the time, Jeffrey Berman, who also got, basically fired and released after the whole kerfuffle with Bill Barr. So there's a lot of questions about it.
Yes, I just told you that the Biden laptop was 200 gigabytes, right? And about 120 of that is homemade pornography, which, what did we do? Did we watch every second? Of course not. We're not creeps. All we did was scrub through it. And what we tried to find was the pictures of the faces of the women to be able to do facial rec, to figure out who they were, to see if they were of age. This press release says there's 300 gigabytes of data. It took us 15 months to go through it all. There is no way, even with teams of people, Robert, that they did that in 5 months. Meaning, by did that, I'll define it very clearly. They may have gone through and looked at all 300 gigabytes. There is no way they can follow every single lead. That island was wired. How can they go through the security footage of everything at the island and run facial recognition analysis on every single person? Speaking of wired, no pun intended, one thing that hasn't gotten enough attention since this 2-page fiasco of a press release is that the outlet called Wired, that was founded in the 70s or whatever, it's very popular in Silicon Valley, went left-wing a long time ago. They apparently bought on the open data market the cell analysis for the cell pinging. They are sitting on a trove and they still won't de-anonymize the data. If the left wing were smart, and some of them are, they're trying to find anything with Trump. That's why they're not releasing it, by the way, because they can't find anything connected to Trump. That's the left wing's only interest in this story. They weren't interested in it for the entirety of Biden's 4 years, right? They had 4 years under his control. They only started talking about it when they thought they could tie in Trump to it. In the Trump base, we care about it for different reasons. I care about it because of potential compromise of public officials. That's my angle, right? That's why I care about it. They could not go through all that 300 gigabytes in 5 months, Robert. You can't do it. Meaning, what would that require? Every single person who you can facially recognize based on software on that island gets a visit from the feds. You follow every single lead. You would go to their house. You would say, okay, you can have an attorney, whatever. That's your right to do an interview with an attorney. You would say, how did you meet him? Can you produce for me all your flight records, right? Because some of these people were going on private planes to the Virgin Islands, and so they're not going to be found on commercial flight logs. They cannot run down every single lead. So why is this email site unprecedented and cool? It's because the public, which has righteous indignation about this, can find no other place besides WikiLeaks, where you can go see the unredacted emails. There is no other place. That's why I'm so proud of the work we've done. I didn't create the email database. I had the vision for it, but I'm not a programmer. I'm so grateful to Jeff and everybody on our team that has done this. We don't get the press that WikiLeaks does because they branded us right-wing people. But we talk about everybody. Epstein is a compromising machine. That's why I care about it. It's not the Trump angle. Trump is looking at this as an all left-wing smear, right? They're only interested in it because of his friendship over 20 years ago, which was done away with by the time he got charged by the West Palm Beach PD. He needs to recognize, and I think he does considering the tweets of Don Jr. over the last 96 hours, that the base is not interested in it for that reason. They're not. They're interested because we don't want compromised public officials. Because compromised public officials, they are constricted even if they wanted to do the right thing, Robert. Even if you wanted to do the right thing, if you're blackmailed, you have to make a choice. And most people won't make the right choice. So thank you for bringing up the press release because that really ticked me off. And they've offered no explanation. I've sent this directly to Todd Blanche, directly to his personal email, cell phone number, everything. Who were the civil liberties experts? I can guarantee you that there are very few teams on the American right that could do a better job than us. The first thing I'd do is I'd run Clearview on every single face on the home security footage. You and I have home security footage. If we're living in an alternate reality and Robert and I had a sex den, what's the first thing you do if you were police investigating that? You'd run to see who went to and from the den. So the case file is what we seek. We don't just seek the grand jury testimony. And remember, Todd Blanche himself, because he's barred in New York, interestingly made the appearance on Friday for the United States. You know that hardly ever happens. You know
I saw that, yeah.
But very few
cases.
times does the sitting DAG enter an appearance on behalf of the United States. So I'm heartened by that. I'm glad he did that. But we need more. And this is an easy win for the Trump admin is what I'm trying to say. Meaning they have to ask a judge, because I actually believe in the separation of powers, unlike our enemies. The judge has the authority to unseal the grand jury. Guess what the judge doesn't have authority over? The case file. Here's another connection between the Bidens in this case, Robert. You know how incredible the IRS whistleblowers were? Principally Gary Shapley. One of the reasons why what he did was so incredible and why Jason Smith was my hero of the 118th Congress. And God loved Comer and all those folks, but you know what Jason Smith did? He held hearings and voted on the release of the documents. It was epic. There were over 150 PDFs on the Ways and Means website. My heart was singing. Why doesn't the DOJ do that? Open up the case file. We're not asking for faces. We don't want faces of 14-year-old girls, right? Open up the case file, redact social security numbers, redact faces, but open up the case file. And you know what's going to happen, I predict? If they don't get their act together on this, and I support Trump through and through, but you'll start seeing individual agents from the FBI who are assigned to this case start leaking stuff. And you're going to have some of them come to the Congress. Apparently, about 72 hours ago, Anna Paulina Luna from Florida said that she had a line agent come to her, and that's what happened in the Biden investigation. 2 line agents, Shapley, they were higher up, but Shapley and Ziegler, Shapley first, Ziegler second, came forward, and then those documents were voted out of committee and put on their website. It was epic. Of course, being the nerd I am, Robert, archive.org, every single one of those, 125 URLs, just archiving the hell out of it, because Hunter can't do anything about it. Now it's on the internet. The internet's written in ink. They need to do that with the Epstein case files. And it makes me so mad that Cash, when he was interviewing with Glenn Beck and all these other people with millions and, huge platforms, are not doing what they said they were going to do. Release the redacted case file. Why not? He's dead, man.
Even the grand jury requests are great. We appreciate that. They're in both cases, the Ghislaine Maxwell case and the Jeffrey Epstein case, but both of those are the newer cases, and there was no grand jury that even was convened as far as I know, or there's no indictment officially for his first set of circumstances. And we were reading...
There was a plea, right? Or NPA, non-prosecution agreement.
Yeah, right. There was a deal before it even got, I think, submitted to a grand jury, and they were contemplating like a 60-count indictment. His lawyers were all over it. One of my concerns about this memo that we're looking at was that it was going to basically be exonerative, kind of come out and, anybody who's questionable could then hold it up and say, well, look, they did an investigation and they haven't found anything on me. And so, stop looking into me because the DOJ just cleared me. And we were trying to contemplate what happened exactly, right? Almost the reversal that you were talking about with Cash and some of these guys. Like, why did the administration shift around this issue? And one concept that we thought about, and I was going to ask you about it, was about this poison pill thesis. So the idea that, the Epstein files are tainted somehow. When you start to see guys like Adam Schiff come out, he's like, release the files. He's like all excited about it. You start to ask yourself, is there some, deeper operation or something happening there? And to me, that sounds, crazy to think about, but we've also reconnected the dots. And you look historically, they've already tried to introduce poison pills and fake hoaxes with the Steele dossier, with the Hunter Biden laptop letter, right? These were fake efforts, basically, from our intelligence agencies that were seeded, one to help Hillary, one to help Biden. And so if Biden's in power, why wouldn't they try to sabotage, the incoming administration and just follow that same pattern?
There is no reason to doubt that they could have done that. What I would suggest is bifurcate the evidence file between that evidence which was gathered before Joe's regime and that which isn't. And if you can, put that asterisk there, meaning we don't know. One of the great things about doing digital investigations, like we do every single day, running faces, running background checks, is that you have timestamps on your own files. So I'll know when I put that in my computer. Same thing with the FBI. They'll know when it gets entered into their evidence locker or virtual evidence locker. Remember that big scandal the first 6 months? And Cash has done some great things with these secret areas of Sentinel that don't even populate based on their FOIA searches. That should be replete with Epstein stuff. So I have nothing in my possession that would make me dispute the poison pill theory. What I can say is that Epstein was investigated and prosecuted both state and federally before Joe's regime. And they should be able to know when a particular piece of evidence or analysis was inserted into that virtual case file. And that alone, even the first thing that they should look for is what came about based on the raids that were conducted when Trump was president. They raided the island and they raided the lair in Manhattan on East 70th Street, I think, one of the largest single family homes in Manhattan. Where did the material found there go? That's the first question. And they should, with genitalia and social security numbers redacted. We can't even get a log, Robert. That's what's so frustrating, right?
This is back to your 300 gigabytes point on this whole thing. It seems very, very tiny. Okay, we covered even the Trump January 6th case, right? That criminal prosecution, and they said they had like 7 million pages of documents or 12 million pages. Like the numbers were insane. Okay, and I know there's a lot of video cameras around the Capitol. Got that, right? So we can, we're not comparing apples and oranges in that regard. But the Epstein file, we went through even the Ghislaine Maxwell trial. We looked at exhibit after exhibit here that was entered by the government, and they would open up drawers in Epstein's place, and he'd have like these binders of DVDs and all sorts of, media files in there with weird names on them, and it was just jam-packed with stuff. So the idea that it's 300 gigabytes, which is like, a long live stream in 4K or something like that, and that's all.
It's a great point. If we want to get involved in the semantics, and I do, you could read this press release as creating a floor and not a ceiling. So they have plausible deniability with the final sentence in the first paragraph. These searches uncovered a significant amount of material, including more than 300 gigabytes of data. What does that mean? 900 gigabytes?
Sure.
Does that mean 2 terabytes, right? You're just telling me that there's a floor there.
Yeah.
So if it's a floor of 300 gigabytes, yes, I agree. That's a small floor for the amount of compromise.
Right. And for decades of criminal investigations and prosecutions by probably hundreds, if not 1,000 people, all these different reports. I mean, it was a lot.
Yes. And Liz Wheeler, whose show I went on a month ago, and Liz Wheeler, of the people who were trotted out with the binders, which in my opinion, when we look back at 2025, it will be one of the dumbest moments of 2025. But Liz Wheeler, of all those people, has been the clearest, Robert, on what occurred that day. They came in on the West Wing basement side where the coke was left, by the way, and it's by the Situation Room, but they left a floor above that where the Circle Drive is, where all the press like vultures sit. They deliberately were led to that exit. So Bondi or whoever wanted a photo op, but Liz Wheeler has been very good about what should occur now. Okay, we got set up. That was a embarrassment to have all these stupid binders saying phase 1, right? But Liz Wheeler had a show on Friday that I thought was very instructive, and one thing that must occur that the Congress can do that doesn't require them to harp on Trump or the left to harp on Trump. So let's put it this way. If we really think that Shartwell and Shifty Schiff care about Jeffrey Epstein, they could call in Alex Acosta tomorrow. Remember, we don't have a sworn statement from Alex Acosta saying that he was connected to intelligence.
And that was the first prosecutor in Epstein's first case. He was the one who gave him that non-prosecution plea deal, just to catch people up if they're not familiar with the name Acosta. But he was the guy who ultimately went to work for Trump, right? Or was about to work for Trump?
He did work for Trump. He worked for Trump for 2.5 years. It sunk his cabinet position. The first casualty of this, after Epstein was indicted and then died, the fallout from that, and all this old news coming up about Acosta's role in the NPA, non-prosecution agreement, he resigned from the Secretary of Labor position. I mean, this guy was confirmed by the Senate. If the Congress is serious about getting to the bottom of this, and we have no reason to believe they are, to be frank, I'm not being cynical, I'm just saying they follow the news cycle. The fact that they haven't called, if I were a congressman, they should have a date set already with Alex Acosta. You're coming in. Hey, would you, receive a letter? We're going to send you this letter as a courtesy. And if you don't respond to it in 2 weeks, we're going to send you a subpoena, right? And you're coming in August. You're going to sit with us for 6 hours. We're going to go through the DPA. This is what serious men would do. This is a hypothetical of what should occur in the Congress, in the lower chamber even. You take 6 hours and you go through every line of the DPA. Then you pull up the original article that said, I was told that he was connected to intelligence and to lay out. You see if the reporter for that article will come in voluntarily. If they won't, you subpoena them for testimony. And then if they want to fight that, they can, but then that's going to be a total PR nightmare fighting it.
Yep.
But you take those two people, the reporter who said that Acosta conveyed that he was a part of intelligence or connected to intelligence, and it could be the nuanced truth, which is that Epstein was a triple agent, right? The people who are hypersensitive to criticism of Israel, they pounce on and take advantage of lack of precision in language. And some of the people on our side will say he was Mossad. That's a simplistic analysis. I'm not denying he could be, Robert. I'm just saying it could be that he was a triple agent. He could have worked for the Brits, the Americans, and the Israelis. All three first world countries. Those are the big powers in the world today. You have the Orient and everything that the Chinese are doing, and I get all that. But the British, the Americans, and the Israelis, some of the highest IQ, most sophisticated people, both in good and evil, on planet Earth. Epstein could have been related to all three of their services. And you ask Acosta, who spoke with you? And instead of just guessing what Acosta is going to say, I know I'm getting animated and moving around, but I'm so passionate about this. Instead of just, talking about it, the Congress has the power to compel testimony. Get Alex Acosta in there. He'll tell you that Trump kicked him out of Mar-a-Lago. That's all been litigated. Vicky Ward, somebody I'm not particularly a fan of, but nevertheless, she wrote this piece in 2003 in Vanity Fair called The Talented Mr. Epstein. And I think Mr. Epstein was talented in one respect, which is gathering compromat. He was a talented compromat gatherer. But there's this 2003 piece by Vicky Ward in Vanity Fair. She's a liberal, what my friends and I would call a shit lib, but she's not a leftist. And you can go read this piece in Vanity Fair and get a good background on this guy. For over 2 years, my research group has pursued the senior yearbook for Jeffrey Epstein from Lafayette High School in Brooklyn, which no longer exists. It got shut down. We can't find a single copy of a senior yearbook. Not a single one, Robert.
Wow.
We found one for Mark, his brother. Mark is a year younger in grade-wise. And we found Mark's senior picture, and that's on my Telegram channel. He had the 60s hairdo. It was atrocious. It's like curly hair. But to this day, there is no person who he went to school with that will sell us his yearbook. I went to Brooklyn Public Library, man. I got off at LaGuardia and spent a whole day there and even, put my schedule around to fly out of JFK later. It's not at the public libraries. So this is a call to your hundreds of thousands of subscribers. If people want to, get involved and they want to know how they can help, the cause for simple transparency, a task. We're not even talking about criminal stuff. Just find the guy's yearbook. David Weiss's father, Meyer Weiss, M-E-Y-E-R. If you look it up, Meyer Weiss tax fraud, you'll find that David Weiss's father took over $200,000 in bribes in the 1980s when he worked for the IRS. This guy's a total crook.
Wow.
From rich businessman, and he spent years in the clink. We couldn't find a photo of Meyer. So this is the 1949 University of Pennsylvania yearbook. So we're essentially digital archaeologists, and there is a picture of Meyer Weiss in here. He became an IRS agent and then took over $200K in bribes, right? It's a sad story. There he is. Meyer Weiss, Wharton School, Philadelphia. So we can't even talk about the talented Mr. Epstein, and to be the devil's advocate, they're going to say, well, I only care about the people he compromised. Yeah, me too. I grant you that. In any investigation, let's start out with who the hell is this guy? He has one brother who was in his will. Both of his parents died early, one in the 90s, one in 2003. He doesn't have a grave. He has an unmarked grave, Epstein. They won't even mark his grave. It's like Saddam, man, in the ocean. Let's just start out with finding his freaking high school yearbook. We can't even find a yearbook of this guy.
Interesting.
So, the simple stuff, right?
And I want to hear from Jeffrey Berman, too, who is the other prosecutor. The first guy you talked about was Acosta. He was the first prosecutor who didn't bring ultimately an indictment, gave him that smoke and deal. And then Jeffrey Berman was the other prosecutor with Epstein who prosecuted him, charged Epstein, right? Epstein's dead a month later. Very convenient. So no discovery, nothing else progresses with the case. His case is now closed, dismissed, it's over. Then we fast forward, 6 months later or whatever, Trump was still in office, and Bill Barr, the U.S. Attorney General, got asked a bunch of, questions about Epstein. He's like, I can't believe it was a suicide. You're like, nobody even talked about suicide. Why are you talking about suicide? And the story was, right, that
talk about a guilty conscience.
Barr fired this guy, apparently, but then Berman responded, I'm not leaving, and basically refused to resign. And then Trump came down and said, you're gone. And then he was ultimately gone. Now he's in private practice. I just looked him up the other day. So he's still around, right? I mean, Congress could subpoena him and have him come in. And I wonder what he would say, if there's any backstory on that about, was his firing or was his forced resignation anything related to Epstein? Was he going to blow the whistle? Does he have something to say?
Part of our research into the Biden laptop book, we bought his book. So I have a PDF of Berman's book. I'll send it to you when we get offline. And I have not searched Epstein in Berman's book, at least to see what he said publicly about it.
I didn't even realize he wrote a book. That's interesting.
He wrote a book. I think the SDNY needs to be shut down. I'm that disappointed with the district. I just think it needs to be subsumed. The other 3 districts just need to take over its workload. It's that much of a rat's nest. And the EDNY isn't much better. But yeah, Jeffrey Berman, U.S. Attorney for the Southern District at the time. And then Strauss took over after Berman, who was even worse. Audrey Strauss was the one who initiated the investigation of James O'Keefe and the Project Veritas guys, which led to a battering ram through their door. So the 2 SDNY U.S. attorneys for Trump #1, and Trump's ultimately responsible as the president. And part of the price of glory and legacy is that the buck stops with you. His choices for the SDNY were awful, and he'll tell you that. You need to put a hardliner in there in the SDNY. This whole blue slip process, Robert, of, you got to get the approval of the 2 senators from the home state. F that. They shot me in the face, man. My ear almost got taken off. Because that was what happened. In the first Trump term, they would nominate the U.S. attorneys that were approved by the senators from that state. That's how Weiss got selected, because David Weiss was loved by the 2 Democrat senators, Carper and Coons of Delaware.
Yeah, and Maureen Comey, speaking of the Southern District of New York, right? Maureen Comey was just there. She just got fired from that position, but she handled all of those cases. She handled the Epstein second case, the Diddy case, and then the Ghislaine Maxwell case.
Yeah, she was there for all the important stuff. And, I like this term called rumor intelligence. I'm not accusing her of anything, but somebody should ask Maureen Comey if it was a coincidence that the week she finally got canned, which was a righteous canning, it should have happened January 21st, was the week that the letter supposedly from Trump was leaked to the Wall Street Journal. My instinct is that those 2 things are related.
Interesting.
That Maureen Comey had access to the case file, and this is the worst thing they have on Trump, a stupid letter before he kicked him out of Mar-a-Lago, before Epstein was arrested. Meaning, if it's like the Prince Andrew, where he's hanging out with him after the DPA, they don't have any plausible deniability. They know he's a pedophile.
Right.
Even their stupid letter that the Wall Street Journal insisted going forward with was in 2003. I bet Maureen kept this, and this is where it is speculation. This book is not speculation, by the way. Everything we say, I swear on. I bet Maureen, as the lead prosecutor, she would have had access to the entire case file. And I bet she did some queries for Trump or Ivanka or Kushner in those files, and she just printed out a copy and had the letter. And then the second she gets canned, she goes to Joe Palazzo at the Wall Street Journal. So that's speculation, but don't you think that's weird?
That makes good sense.
Leaves? And think about how stupid the left has to feel if that's the worst. They're implying that Trump had dalliances with like 14-year-olds, man. Like horrid stuff. And the most you get is a locker room, and I'm not even saying it's real. I'm positing, in law you do these things called stipulations, as you know, better than me. Let's just stipulate the birthday card is real. That is stupid, man. It's stupid. That's the worst you got? If Maureen Comey leaked it, that's the worst from the case file on Donald Trump. That's even more reason for the administration to open up the kimono and release everything.
Yeah.
It's a dumb birthday card before he gets arrested. So it's all very distressing. From the outside, there's only a limited number of things we could do. We created this site for maximum transparency. You want to go through, search every single person that came up in the Ghislaine Maxwell trial. Matthew Russell Lee, who I admire from afar, Inner City Press, great guy. He wrote a whole book on the Ghislaine Maxwell trial, set through every single day of it, the only reporter to do so. I would urge your audience to go look him up. Look up every single person that was named at the Ghislaine Maxwell trial, search their name in our BidenLaptopEmails.com database. The other thing is demand more than just the grand jury testimony unsealing. Demand that the case file be opened with particular redactions for the face and genitals of all victims. We don't want to see that. And the most dishonest people are even some people on the right saying that the Trump administration can't release the case file and you're just perverts because you want to see. There are actually people who call us perverts because we want to see the case file. We don't want any sex tapes to be released, right? That's not what we're about. We want the uncharged people to be indicted. And it was a conspiracy. You talk about statute of limitations, and these conversations make my hair stand up because I love them. I love a good intellectual back and forth over, what was the last overt act in the conspiracy? That's good argumentation. It's what we have at Marco Polo every day. You can create a very good argument based on the convicted Ghislaine Maxwell case that the conspiracy started in the 90s and ran up all the way through 2018. What does that mean? That means everybody who had sex with an underage person or a above age person who was sex trafficked, because both can occur, should be charged. There is no statute of limitations for the Epstein Island because it was a part of a conspiracy. Donald Trump said this when he was running in 2016. He said that island is a cesspool. Just ask Prince Andrew. Have you seen this tape?
I don't think I've seen that one.
A cesspool. There's no question about it. Just ask Prince Andrew. He'll
Wow.
tell you about it. The island was an absolute cesspool.
I love that because it's so true. It was
Yeah.
a great statement. Trump should be proud of making that statement.
Yeah.
So this was in 2015. The island, as we know, was a complete cesspool. He invokes the Duke of York, who has been stripped of his titles. And I'll say this, the worst televised interview in the history of that medium
It was
with the
bad.
BBC. I've seen Hunter Biden interviews, okay?
Yeah,
That
his
was
were bad too.
the
That's
most
saying something.
uncomfortable. You can tell he's a sociopath. He was lying about dumb shit in that interview. Not even important stuff.
Yeah.
He was making up that he was at a pizza parlor. When has Prince Andrew ever held a birthday party for his daughters at a pizza joint in a middle-class area outside of London? He would be caught dead there. So Prince Andrew was invoked in that 2015 interview, and it was a cesspool. You pull on that string, and you have a conspiracy case. And 18 U.S.C. 371 cases are always difficult because it's always, for a good reason, tough to get a jury to believe beyond a reasonable doubt there was an overt act, right? But guess what? You'll have flight logs. You'll have the place was wired because it was all about compromise. That should be enough for a jury to say this was an overt act. There was an overt conspiracy going on to ship people to the island. It was a bacchanalia. You study ancient Greece. You know this, Robert. There was a festival called Bacchus, which was a time of wine, drunkenness, revelry, and orgies. You can go look this up, bacchanalias. The Epstein Virgin Islands was a bacchanalia, and that is the definition of a conspiracy. What does this mean? That means everybody implicated by this two-page BS, unsighted, undated press release. The idea that there is no third party who's uncharged is preposterous.
Yeah.
Because he needed more than Ghislaine to be a headhunter. Ghislaine, by the end, Ghislaine was the lady of the house. Pun intended, because her dad's yacht that he died on was called Lady Ghislaine. But she was the lady of the house. And the lady of the house doesn't do the headhunting. The lady of the house directs the butlers and the servants, okay? That's what they do. They don't go out on the street to get the women, to get the 16-year-olds, to give him the digital stimulation massages that he so loved. I know it's perverted, but we have to live in reality. There were other people for that. Who are those other people? The Palm Beach police will know. They'll have it in their files.
Yep.
Some 16-year-old talked to the Palm Beach police and they say, okay, tell me what happened. Well, and I've read all this, some of these with redactions. They'll say, well, I left school one day. I was 16. I was post-pubescent. There is some evidence that Epstein wasn't so much into prepubescent girls. It was mostly illegal post-pubescent girls, mostly. They say they'd leave high school. They were approached by somebody. Do you want to earn some extra money? You give this guy massages. That is what the victims have said in sworn statements to law enforcement. That person on the side of the road has a name. They have an address. They'll have a social security number, and some of them won't be Ghislaine Noel Maxwell.
Right.
Who are those people?